Welcome, my name is Mr. Juma John Austin, and today I want to take you through the documents in Hometrade. First of all, I'd like us to get an understanding of what Hometrade is, and I'll define for you. Hometrade is the buying and selling of goods and services within a geographical area of a nation. And in any trade system, there must be documents that are used. And today, I'm going to take you through the documents in Hometrade. They are 19 in number. 14 are sent from the seller to the buyer, and 5 are sent from the buyer to the seller. Journey with me as I'll be taking you through the documents of Hometrade. Also, I'll show you the samples of the documents of Hometrade. So we shall start by the very first document of Hometrade, which is called Letter of Inquiry. Letter of inquiry is a request by a possible buyer for information about goods sold by a seller. So for example, a buyer wants to acquire some given commodities from a company. He will write a letter of inquiry to ask the seller the kind of goods that he is selling, or rather the kind of commodities that is in stock. And inquiries can be either oral or written. And when the seller receives this letter of inquiry, he may send back, or rather he may write back to the buyer by either sending a catalog, or rather a quotation, or rather a price list. These are documents that also we are going to talk about because they are part of the documents of Hometrade. And here it is a sample of a letter of inquiry. We see it has the date, it has the subject, and it is written to Mr. Lloyd, and it is written to inquire about a laptop, a Lenovo laptop, and he's also specifying that he's planning to buy 15 laptops for my business purpose. So this is a sample of a letter of inquiry, and after the letter of inquiry, I'll take you through rather to the next document of Hometrade, which is called a catalog. A catalog, it is a booklet. It briefly describes the goods a seller has in stock. Let's say a seller has received a letter of inquiry from the buyer. In return, he writes a catalog to the buyer. And it describes the commodities that are in stock. And maybe we can just see some of the contents that are contained in the catalog. Number 1, after sales service offered by the seller. Number 2, packaging and posting expenses to be incurred, also delivery services to be used, and also the terms of sale. So I'll show you here an example of a catalog. It is for example, these are bags. They have the prices. So these are commodities that the buyer wants maybe to buy. So the seller will write a catalog, because most of the companies do have catalogs explaining the commodities they are selling with their prices and any other specifications. So this is an example of a catalog. And let us go to the other Hometrade document, and it is called quotation. It is called quotation. This is a document. It is sent from the seller to the buyer, let's say in response to a specific letter of inquiry. And let's see on how the contents that are contained in this quotation. The first content is the name and address of seller, name and address of the buyer. Also, it states the description of goods to be supplied, and also prices of commodities, and also terms of sale and total of the goods to be supplied. So let me show you an example of a quotation here. Let me show you an example of a quotation. Okay, this is an example of a quotation. We can see several columns. We can see the company name, where this it is being sent to. Also, we have the column of the quantity, we have the description, we have the unit price, and we have the total. So that is an example of a quotation. Let's go to the next document of Hometrade. It is called a price list. I know most of us have encountered this because this is a common thing that maybe you can't miss out in your day-to-day life. A price list, basically it is just a list of items sold by the seller together with their prices, and this is sent from the seller to the buyer. So that is it. And here is an example of a price list. You have the let's say electronic business name, we have the item, we have the price, we have the quantity, we have the total. So that is the price list. Actually it has the name, the item and its price. So that is what we call a price list. Let's also go and talk about another Hometrade document that it is called an order. So let's say if a prospective buyer decides maybe to purchase items, he can place what we call an order. It is basically, this is a document sent by a potential buyer to a seller to be provided with specific products under specified terms and condition. An order issued for goods is called a local purchase order, and that issued for services it's called a local service order. So perhaps let me just show you on how an order looks like. So begin, this we have said it is sent by the buyer to the seller. So let's say purchase from, ship to. We have the item description. When let's say the buyer wants to buy some items, he writes here the name of the item, the quantity, the unit price that was quoted in the price list, and the amount. So this is what we call an order. So let's journey and go to the next Hometrade document called acknowledgement note. As the word itself, it speaks for itself. It is saying acknowledgement note. When the seller receives an order from the buyer, to reply back, he sends the buyer an acknowledgement note. An acknowledgement note, it is just a document that is sent by the seller to the prospective buyer to inform him or her that the order has been received and it is being acted upon. So for example, after sending the acknowledgement, the seller has to decide whether to extend the credit to the buyer or not. So let me take you on how an order looks like. An acknowledgement note. Here it is an acknowledgement note. You see, we have the name of the company, the date, name of the recipient, we have the subject, we have the salutation, and let's just have an overview of the content that has been covered in this acknowledgement note. For example, this letter says this is to confirm that the order has been received by us on the date blah and is currently under process. So you see, that is an acknowledgement note. So after there, we go to the next document of Hometrade called packing note. Some words here just speak for themselves. Here we are saying packing note. I believe each one of us maybe has packed something. I do not know what it is, but I believe that in one way or another you have packed such commodities. And before delivery, goods are packed for dispatch. So this is a document that is prepared by the seller to the buyer, showing the goods that have been packed in every container or in every box or in every carton being delivered from to the buyer. A copy of the packing note is packed with goods to make the buyer, once the buyer receives it, he makes a spot check as in and packs. So let's see on the contents of a packing note. We have the description of goods packed, quantities of goods packed, the means of delivery also. So let's see on how a packing note looks like. Yeah, so a packing note is here. We have the packing note here. So let's just go to this table. We have item column. So let's say the seller has packed these electronics, let's say laptops. Then the description, or rather the specifications of the given laptops, and also the quantity, the number of laptops that he has packed in the in that given parcel. So let's go to the next document of Hometrade. After the packing note, we go to the next document of Hometrade. That also it is one of the documents that are received, are carried out in the Hometrade logistics. So we have the advice note. What is an advice note? It is a document sent by the seller to the buyer to inform the buyer that the ordered goods have been dispatched. Once the goods are dispatched, the seller has to write to the buyer to inform him that the goods have been dispatched, and this has to be written using the fastest mean possible, so that he can even receive the advice note before receiving the goods. And some of the contents of the advice note is the means of delivery, a description of the goods, the quantity dispatched, and also the date. So let me show you on how a basic and also it contains the name and address of the buyer. So here is an example of an advice note. As we can see, it looks that way. So let us journey and go to the following Hometrade document, which is the delivery note. As we all understand, as we all can just hear the word itself speaking for itself, it is called delivery note. What is to deliver? So this is a document sent by the seller to the buyer to accompany the goods being delivered. And in most cases, there are 3 copies of the delivery note. One copy remains with the with the seller, and 2 others are sent to the buyer. And when the goods reach the buyer, he or she confirms that the goods are the ones ordered for and that they are in the right condition by comparing the delivery note, the order, and the goods. Let's say the buyer is satisfied with the goods. He signs the 2 copies, retains the original one, and sends the other copy to the seller. So this, in most cases, it usually serves as an evidence that goods have been received in the right condition and in the right quantities. So let's see maybe the content that is usually in the delivery note. It is the name and address of the seller, name and address of the buyer, date of delivery, delivery note number, description of the goods delivered, quantities of goods delivered, space for the buyer to sign and comment on the condition of the goods received. So let's see, here is an example of a delivery note. very true. As we have just seen the contents, this is how a delivery note looks like. That is it. So let's continue to the next document of Hometrade, which is the consignment note. In most cases, a consignment note is prepared by the transporter to show that he has been hired and is the one who is going to deliver those specific goods, or rather those specified goods, to a particular buyer. And this document is used when goods are delivered to the buyer by public means of transport, let's say trains, planes, and so on. The seller is the consignor and the buyer is the consignee, and the goods the consignment. Yeah, so the company that is transporting these commodities, it does prepare a consignment note and give the seller to complete and sign. So in most cases, the consignment note is written by companies. As we can see, this is, for example, this company that is consigning or rather is transporting these commodities, it is called Breakwells. So that company prepares a consignment note and it is signed by the seller. Yeah, so that is it. So let's go to another Hometrade document that is called invoice. What is an invoice? This is a document. It is sent by the seller to the buyer demanding the payment for goods delivered. And in most cases, or rather, there are two types of invoices. Number one, we have cash invoices, and number two, we have credit invoices. So let me now maybe just tell you more about a cash invoice and a credit invoice. A cash invoice is paid across the counter, thus acting as a cash sale receipt, while the credit invoice is issued when the buyer is allowed to pay at a later date. So let's now see some of the functions of an invoice. So it shows the details of goods sold. It is also a request to the buyer to make a payment, and is used as a source document in recording the transactions in the books of accounts. So let's let me show you what is an invoice. So this is how an invoice looks like. Yeah, so have a look. We have the company name, we have bill to, ship to, we have the description, the quantity, the unit price, and the amount. And also you see payments down here. We are being told on comment, payment due in 30 days. So this person has to make the payment within the 30 days. So let's go. So we have a pro forma invoice, being another document of Hometrade. So let's learn more about a pro forma invoice. What is maybe we can just see what, because we have seen an invoice just up there and we have been told what an invoice is. So let us maybe just in a microsome way enlighten ourselves on what are the functions of a pro forma invoice. One of the function, it serves up as a polite request for payment before the goods are sent to the buyer, sent when the seller does not want to give credit to the buyer. Let's say you don't want to sell your commodities on credit. What are you going to do? You are going to give to send a pro forma invoice to the seller, to the buyer, informing him that you won't give him the commodities on credit. Also, it is used by importers to get customs clearance before the goods are sent. Also, it can serve the same purpose as the quotation. So let's see, here is a pro forma invoice. Very clear as it is. So bill from, bill to, invoice number, invoice date, due date, so, and we have the description, the quantity, the price, and the total. So we have terms and conditions. Let's say, thank you for your business, please send payment within maybe you can specify the seller will specify how many days of receiving this invoice note. So let's go to the next document of Hometrade, which is called goods received note. So as the word speaks for itself, goods received note. So this is a document that is sent by the buyer to the seller to inform him or her that the goods that he has sent have been received. So it is usually prepared mostly in duplicate. The original is sent to the seller and the copy is returned by the buyer. So let's see on some of the contents of goods received notes. It contains the date of the document, the name and the address of the buyer, the name and the address of the seller, corresponding purchase order, and details of goods received. So let's see on the example, or rather on how a goods received note looks like. So here it is. It contains all those things that we have just talked about. So this is how it looks like. And in this goods received note, the buyer also must specify some of the things. Let's say there is a unit type, there is a column of unit type, the item description, number of units received, number received damaged. You see, you have also to state the number of the goods that have been damaged, and we have the batch number and the condition. So that is an example of goods received note. And also we have another document of Hometrade called damaged goods note, or rather returned goods. So let's say in case some of the goods are damaged, the buyer sends them back to the seller together with a note that is called a damaged goods note, and mostly it is prepared in triplets, let's say 3, sorry. So 2 copies are sent to the seller and 1 is retained by the buyer. So when the seller receives the damaged goods note, they will issue a document called a credit note. So before we go to that, maybe we can just see a damaged goods notes. So this is, here it is. We have the quantity, we have the code number, we have the description, we have the rate, and also we have the amount. So as we continue, let's talk about a credit note. So a credit note, it is a document that is issued to correct, let's say, an overcharge and reduce the amount due from a buyer as shown in the invoice. In most cases, it is issued, let's say, under the following circumstances. Let's say when the goods returned by the buyer because they are either damaged or they are not in accordance with the order. Also when packing cases and empty containers are returned. Thirdly, there is an overcharge in the invoice as a result of arithmetical error. So let's see on how a credit note looks like. Here is a very clear sample of a credit note. We have the from, ship to, we have the description, we have the unit price, we have the quantity, and we have the amount. So there is another document called the debit note. In most cases, this is just a document that is used to make undercharge corrections to invoices, maybe that have been previously sent to the buyer. So in most cases, errors that may make a debit note to be issued are mistakes in calculation, omission of items in the invoice, price undercharge on items. So this is how a debit note looks like. So here you can have a look. We have the debit note, bill to, we have the description, we have the quantity, we have the unit price, we have the total price. So let's talk about another document of Hometrade called the statement of account. Most in business accountings, we do talk about the statements of accounts, and I want us to know what are statements of account so that we can get an analogy of what it is. Let's say let's say in a case whereby transactions are carried out on credit. Now the seller sends a document containing all the transactions between the buyer and the seller, and it normally contains information, let's say derived from a specific period of time, let's say a month, let's say from the following: all invoices, all credit notes, a debit notes, all recipients. And it contains the name and address of both the buyer and the seller, the account number, date column, particulars or details, money column with debit, credit, and running balance column, and also terms of credit. So let's have a look of how it looks like. So here it is. This is a document. Yeah, it is called a statement of account. Here it is. So also let's go to another document of Hometrade, which is called a receipt. What is a receipt? I believe that each one of us has encountered what we call a receipt. Maybe you have gone to buy commodities, let's say in a supermarket, in a grocery, in a butcher, in a bookshop, any place. You have to be issued a receipt for the goods that you have purchased. So, and in most, it is just a proof of the payments that you have made to acquire those commodities or other things that you are buying. And it contains the following: it contains the date of payment, name of the person making the payment, that is the buyer, amount paid in words and figures and means of payment, name of the institution or person to whom payment is made, revenue stamp if the amount is above a set minimum, and also the receipt number. So let's see it here. Here it is. So we have from, then sold to who. So we have the description, the items, the quantity of items that the buyer bought from the seller, the unit price of each items, and the total amount. So that is it. And as we close the business, we have a document called IOU note. It is a written acknowledgement of a debt, and written by a debtor, and does specify the date when the settlement will be made. So you see, it is like you are making a vow. So let's say this is an example, and here we have I, the undersigned, the name of the borrower, hereby confirm and acknowledge to the name of the lender that I am indebted to said debt as to the debt set forth. So this is an example of an IOU note. And reaching there, I think we have exhaustively covered the 14, or rather the 19 documents of Hometrade. And at this moment, I really thank you all for watching my presentation. Thank you and bye.